Look who came back. Welcome back to my channel, where today we're going to be talking about the newly released OG Urban Decay Naked palette. It's back for a limited time, which I feel like is such a waste because this classic palette is, I feel, so iconic, number one, so wearable, number two, and I just don't understand why they would release it for a limited amount of time when it has such a cult following. But I digress. So there's been some chitter chatter, pitter patter on the internet saying that this palette, even though it is a re-release, is not the same as the old one. So here you go. Here's the brand new Naked Urban Decay palette. It still has that fuzzy, velvety, textured outer packaging. Inside we have our brush, and here are the shadows, all the same as the old palette. So you have the exact replica of the original. Now, some people say that this palette is slightly different than the original. People are buying the old one off of eBay, but I am a hoarder, and I have my original Urban Decay Naked palette. So here they are, side by side. Immediately, we can see some differences with the packaging. We have the same velvet texture, but the Urban Decay logo is moved from underneath the D to underneath the N. On the back packaging, it was originally a sticker, whereas now it's embossed on the back. I do like this concept better. It looks cleaner, it looks nicer than having it as a sticker on velvet. I think that was a little tacky. I'm also noticing that there's a very, very slight difference in size. You can, like, ever so slightly, right there, ever so slightly. There's an ever so slightly difference in size. You can't really see it from the top, but I'm telling you, let me line these up. You can see it there. There's just like an ever so slightly difference from the bottom one. The new one is just slightly larger. Compare shades, you can see here's the comparison of the two of them. So mine is from the original release. It is well loved, and there could be some color differences just simply based on the age, but you will notice some differences right off the bat, including Sin is slightly different. In the new one, it looks a little bit lighter in my opinion. Also, Naked looks a little bit lighter in the original. The new one looks a little bit darker. Sidecar looks a little bit less glittery. The new one looks a little bit more glittery. Buck is also slightly warmer in the original one, whereas the new one looks a little bit more cool toned just off the bat. All the other shades look like they match up perfectly. So we're gonna get swatching now. I'm gonna do an arm swatch on my arm so we can really see everything laid out very clearly. So I've swatched up the entirety of the original Naked palette. This is the entire Naked one swatched out. We're going to compare this to the new one. So immediately I see some very clear differences between the new one and the old one. So we're going to start with the first shade, Virgin. The original one was a little bit more frosty, a little bit lighter. The new one is a little bit more neutral, and I'll be honest, I like the original a lot more. And we have Sin, the second shade here. They're very close. The original one is a little bit lighter, but honestly, if you're wearing them in the eye, you're not going to see a difference. The biggest difference here was the Naked shade. The original Naked was so much more sheerer, more natural. The new one is very heavily pigmented, and it swatches so much darker. Honestly, I was shocked when I saw these swatches side by side. I couldn't believe the difference here. Sidecar. I did say that the new Sidecar looked a little bit more shimmery. It is a little bit more shimmery, and it's a little bit deeper. It also had a smoother application, so it's this shimmery shade right here. The next shade is Buck. Buck was a little bit more chocolatey. The new one is a little bit, it's a little bit like deeper, a little bit richer. I prefer the old one, honestly. And I kind of prefer the old one here. The next one is the shade Half Baked. This one was identical. I don't see much of a difference here. The next shade is Smog. Again, much difference in the shade here. Smog used to be a softer shade, a lighter shade. The new one has a little bit more shimmer to it. It's much deeper. Then we have the shade Dark Horse. Very similar. This might be an aging problem. The old one was a little bit more chalky, a little bit more sheer. The new one is very smooth, almost buttery. It has more of that golden shimmer to it. I like the new one more. This one, I like the new one. The next one is Toasted, where these are just very similar, but also very different. And that comes to just the tonage. They're similar when you look at them up close. They're very similar, but then when you look at them from afar, you can see that they look like two different shades. The original Toasted was more pink. The new one is more brown. Next up, we have Hustle, which I feel like performed equally. It's a little bit sheer. The formulation of this one wasn't my favorite, but they both performed equally. The next one was Creep, which I thought the new Creep had a little bit more shimmer in it. It does. It also applies a little bit more pigmented, and it was a little bit more buttery. And then lastly, Gunmetal. Gunmetal used to be a little bit more blue, whereas now it's a little bit more black. So it used to have more blue in it. Now it is more black. So again, you can really see there is a difference. It lies in your preference. So for me, the original Naked palette, I like it because it's nostalgic and these are the shades I'm used to working with. I feel like the Naked 2, it's not an exact match, but I feel like it'll get the job done. I'm gonna swatch up the third shade for you guys, because I want you to see just how different this shade performed when I swatched it. I was in shock. Naked. You would think the namesake shade would remain the same. So that was a little bit jarring for me. So the original Naked was a little bit of like a grayish beige. And you can see it's definitely got a lighter look to it. No matter how many times I rub my finger in this one, no matter how many times I try to pick it up, it's still going to look grayy. The new one, completely different. Like, different finger. Shockingly different. The texture too, I'm getting a little bit, like, you see how that like immediately like caked onto my finger and it just fell in my tea. You can see instantly. Look at how much deeper and darker that is. It's like night and day here. And I really rubbed my finger in that. I really tried to get that swatch on there. You can just see how different these shades are. This one it's a little bit more brown. You can see that it is a little bit deeper. It's definitely much deeper. It's definitely got more brown in it, and it's definitely more pigmented. So my takeaway on the Naked versus Naked is that if you loved the original, and let's face it, this is expired, you should not be putting this on your eyes. We all put it on our eyes, though. I'm telling you right now, I'm going to do a look today where one eye is going to be the new one and one eye is going to be old one. We're going to use the same shades. We're going to see how the look looks. You probably shouldn't be using expired makeup. So if you want to get the Naked palette, get the new one. This way, it's not, it's not going to hurt your eyes. I do wish that this was a permanent release, because I don't understand why they wouldn't permanently release this, given that it's such a favorite. But if you don't have the original one, or yours is deeply expired, I would just get the new one, because honestly, they're close enough. They're close enough. If you're a stickler for shades and you like perfection like I do, you might miss some of your favorites. You might be like, oh, but I loved the original one. But honestly, I think you can get the same look using the new shades. And we're going to test out this theory. I'm going to do a look and we're going to see, does the new shadow live up to the old shadow? And we're definitely going to be including Naked in there to see how much of a difference it is. So to start off this look, we're using the original Naked palette and we're using the included brush for the new Naked palette. We will wipe this off between each palette that we use to make sure that we're not cross-contaminating, but we're going to start off the look on this eye. We're going to be doing the original. Now, Naked was a shade that I used to use all over the lid. I just loved how beautiful the shade looked on my lid. So we're going to go into the original Naked and we're going to hope that I don't get pink eye. So immediately, I love the original Naked because it just matched almost identically to like the natural lid shade that I have. I have like a slightly pigmented lid, but it kind of neutralized everything, and I loved that it was like a grayish look because this is such a warm palette, and I feel like this shade particularly added balance. So warming it up just makes this palette just a little bit too warm for my taste, the new one. So there we go, it's all over the lid. We've wiped off the brush and now we're going into the new Naked, and immediately I want you to look at all the kickback that is in this palette. Like, look at the kickback happening. Like, that is atrocious. So I'm immediately disgusted at the amount of kickback in this palette, and I knew when I was swatching it with my finger that it was going to be problematic, just how much product was ending up on my finger and just how much it was just looking very like almost too soft of a shadow. I knew this was going to be trouble in a way that I didn't have that problem with the original one, but we're gonna see if we're gonna end up with fallout on my cheek. So I'm applying it all over the lid, and I definitely feel like there's too much shadow on the brush just because of the way it applied. So this is surprising. On the lid, they look almost identical. So this is the old Naked palette, the shade Naked, and this is the new Naked palette, Naked. I definitely feel like this applied way too much product on the brush, and it deposited way too much on the lid. The original Naked applied so much softer, so much smoother. The new Naked just really got too much shadow on the brush and just looks overwhelming and almost messy. Because of the textural differences, like, I had to clean up the lid just because the shades just applied so much different texturally. But on the lid, they're very similar. Again, the new Naked just slightly darker, but on the lid, it's not as apparent as when you do like a compressed swatch, which is relieving. So at least you're getting a similar shade. So I'm gonna put the shade Sidecar. I've wiped off my brush and I'm putting Sidecar, which you can see there is no fallout, which is great. I loved that the original palette didn't have any of the fallout. I'm gonna be applying this to the center of my lid. Now for this shade, I used to spray my brush to get a nice full pigmentation of this, but I'm gonna do a dry swatch on both lids and then we'll do a spritzed swatch so we can see the difference. All right, now we're going into Sidecar in the new Naked palette. Okay, so there was not a lot of fallout. Thankfully, there was no fallout, but you can see there's a lot more shimmer pickup with the application of the new shade. I have a feeling this side is just going to be a little bit more shimmery. And I was right. So this one is a bit more shimmery and metallic, whereas the original one is just more metallic. Here is the original Naked palette and the new Naked palette. It's a lot more glittery. The new one is a lot more glittery compared to the old one, which was just a bit frosty. Now to get maximum metallic look, we would swipe our brush into the shadow and then spritz the brush. And this would create like a metallic look, like a really nice pigmented metallic look. Now I've cleaned off the brush and we're gonna go into the new Sidecar. Get a nice coating of it. We're gonna spritz our brush. So the biggest differences that I'm noticing here is that one side just has a little bit more shimmer to it. It's a little bit more foiled, and this one is a little bit warmer. This one's a little bit more cool. So while they hand swatched slightly differently, on the lid, they don't look that much difference. You honestly would not be able to tell the difference if you're looking at someone. I'm gonna use a separate brush and I'm gonna go into Hustle, just a little bit of Hustle. I'm gonna be applying that to the outer corner. A nice classic smoky eye. So the original is giving me some fallout on my cheek. Now we're going into Hustle of the new one, which is giving me lots of kickback, which is giving me a little bit of kickback, but it's not as bad as Naked. And immediately what I'm noticing is that they're both really, really pigmented. So immediately what I notice is the original one does have fallout. It is a little bit, it's a little bit different in shade, but honestly, again, when applying on the lid, it does not look that much different. We're gonna clean up the eye look just a little bit because we have fallout on the face. We wanna clean that up, get a little more of a clean line. What I will say, again, is that on the lid, despite the fact that these two swatched differently for some shades, on the lid, they look almost identical. You would not be able to tell them apart. If you asked me, did you use two different palettes 10 years apart? You wouldn't ask me that on the street. You would think they came from the same palette. I'm going to finish this look with a little mascara. This is the Thrill Seeker. This is Thrill Seeker from Rimmel London. Just going to put a little bit on. Back in the day, I would have did false lashes. I'm not doing that today. I've become a mascara girly since my time period of the Naked palette. And when the Naked palette came out, I was like very newly into doing Instagram. I was still pretty new to it, especially like doing beauty blogging, beauty Instagramming as like a full-time job. I was pretty new to it, but yeah, so we're gonna do a little mascara. So my takeaway is this: if you loved the original Naked palette and every look you can create with it, the new limited edition Naked palette or re-release of the original one, it's definitely going to scratch that itch. It's definitely going to allow you to recreate those looks you used to love. Will there be slight differences in formulation and shade? Yes, but not enough for you to really notice them. There will be differences when you do hand swatches or, you know, compacted swatches, but when you're applying it and using it, you can barely tell the difference. Like, you really have to scrutinize it and look very closely. The shades, they're not terribly unique. You know, you can find these shades in a lot of palettes nowadays. I feel like everybody makes a brown, warm, cool tone, neutral palette. But I feel like there's just something special about the Naked Urban Decay palette, especially if it's a palette that you had back in the day and you just want to relive those, you know, glory days. Or maybe you weren't around, maybe you weren't into makeup at the time and you were like, oh, I always wished I could get my hand on it, but you don't want to get an expired or reach for an older one. You want to re-up, you want to replace your older one. Definitely worth it. And I feel like for the collector, for somebody that really just loves makeup history, makeup in the modern world, modern life, not modern world, modern life, I feel like the Naked palette, it's something you should get. It's very wearable, it's very usable. I can see this palette being used every single day. And I used to use mine quite heavily, and you can see that I never hit pan. And I've had mine since it was released. So the Naked Urban Decay palette, the new one, get it. Expect there to be slight differences in shade and texture, but I would recommend that you get it. So have you tried the re-release of the Urban Decay Naked palette or the original? Let me know. And if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave me some comments. Let's have a discussion. If you want to see more of my routines, you can always head over to Instagram at Recycled Stardust, where I do different routines every day in my story, and you can follow along with my New York City lifestyle content, where I show you what to eat, where to go, and of course, beauty and fashion. Or if you'd like to learn a little bit more about Native American history and heritage, you can head over to TikTok at Recycled Stardust, no E before the D. And as always, you guys, thank you so much for watching.